Hey everybody. So I was inspired by this exchange I had earlier in the week to exhume the Max mod, put more nails in the coffin, and then rebury it. So I don't want to stand here and wave my hands around with this for 20 minutes and look at the backs of the devices and the size, and so I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. The exchange I got was like self-defeating arguments, and it was amusing. So, I guess I could go over some of that stuff, the claims that were made in the exchange, but it started with like these conversations usually do when somebody it's sort of over the years tapered off, as far as people emailing me to ask me about this. But with the new radios, there's been an increase in it, slight increase in it. I might get one a month, and now I think I get maybe two questions about this. And it's usually like, oh, there's this heatsink inside of the new 955 and 655, so therefore, Max mods should work better than the TIP 36 on that radio. It will work the same because you haven't changed any of the underlying conditions in the circuit or that the device is operating in. So there's no free lunch. The math doesn't work. And that was my reply. P equals VI. Power is equal to the voltage times the current. Now, when I say voltage, I mean the voltage drop across the device. So if we have 1 volt drop between the collector and the emitter on these devices, and remember, they're P channel. So let's say you have 12 volts on the emitter and 11 on the collector, and you are running 1 amp of current through them. Every one of these will make a watt of heat. It doesn't matter if this one's in the circuit, this one's in the circuit, or this one is in the circuit. It's 1 watt of heat. So now that you know that they can't possibly run cooler. Okay? It is an impossibility. It will not happen. Okay? Because, again, they're all making the same amount of heat. And that's just reality. Now, that's usually when people start with the "but bigger is better," which is an ignorance on fire statement. And I'll get links to some videos where people say, oh, but bigger is better. That is an ignorance on fire statement. That is I didn't run the numbers, or I don't know any better, or I just am saying things that are not true just because I can. So, again, since I don't know what people's intentions are, I just call it, with regards to these things, I just call it an ignorance on fire statement. Took it from a friend of mine. He's the one who, I think he got it from a book. But that said, that's not true. It's not even close to reality. So that's one argument. The other argument is that I'll usually get a link to a video where somebody is taking these devices, like a TIP 36, sticking it in the back of a radio and sticking a thermocouple on it, and then saying, oh, see, the TIP 36 gets hotter faster than the Max mod does. Yeah, so how is that in any way, shape, or form a controlled test when you're taking a semiconductor device, running it at full load with no heatsink, and then, of course, the smaller device, which has a higher thermal resistance in air than these, and saying it runs cooler, and that therefore you win the argument? That is a galactically stupid ignorance on fire test. And here's why. Let's say we have a Max mod, a TTA 1943, and a TIP 36. And we have a heatsink on the radio. And this heatsink is capable of dissipating 40 watts of heat into 72 degree Fahrenheit air and reaching an equilibrium of, let's say, 120 Fahrenheit. Now, I'm just pulling these numbers out of the air. But let's say that that's the situation, with the heatsink. So our devices, now 40 watts is close to operating condition for these in the Striker. It's going to be around that. Depends on where your power setting is on the radio. But let's say that that's the condition. 40 watts of heat into the heatsink. It's capable of delivering or dissipating that 40 watts of heat, reaching a temperature of 120 Fahrenheit in 72 degree Fahrenheit air. That means that all of these devices in this circuit will heat this heatsink up on this radio to 120 degrees Fahrenheit over some amount of time and reach equilibrium. So it'll hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there as long as the device is generating its 40 watts of heat. Now, which one of these do you think is going to get to that temperature faster? If you said the tip 36, that would be incorrect. And that is because the tip 36, because of its smaller heat spreader, will have a higher thermal resistance and it will be a little slower at reaching equilibrium on the heatsink versus the other two. It'll still get to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, in our hypothetical situation, but and that's it. They'll all get to that temperature. It's just that these devices will get there faster. And when I did the test years ago, that is exactly what happened. These devices got there faster than this one did. And no, there wasn't any 40% reduction in temperature, and no, there wasn't any 10% increase in power, because the temperature and the power actually didn't change. They just reached equilibrium, and that was all there was to it. So that is why the device doesn't work, point blank, because you haven't changed the current and the voltage drop across these devices. If you put them in the same exact situation with the same exact numbers, they will create the same amount of heat and the heatsink will get to the same temperature. Doesn't matter which one. The only difference will be how long it takes to get there. So that said, the exchange basically continued. When I explained that and did the math and sent that back, and I got a reply. I paid good money for it, and I had to wait 2 years for the radio, so I feel like it works. That's another one of the arguments I get about these devices. Well, I feel like they work. I feel like it. I believe. So, okay. The problem is your belief. That's not something that I have anything to do with. If you want to believe in the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, then that's your prerogative. You can believe in those things. And that's got nothing to do with me. So I just simply replied, well, I'm sorry that you waited 2 years to get it. And left it at that. So I get a reply. And this is where this starts to get interesting. Galaxy and Ranger won't use a tip 36, so that's how we know the Max Mod is better. So this device, these Max Mods, are better because Galaxy and Ranger won't use these. Right. But they're not using this either. So how does that work? Okay. So they don't use a Max Mod, and they don't use a tip 36, but because they don't use a tip 36, that means a Max Mod is better. I'm trying to understand that logic. It's self-defeating. Because Galaxy and Ranger made a business decision to use a really cheesy, like 2SB 8 whatever numbered part, I believe, and run it at the margins, which fails, and they bought them. So I replied with that. I said, the choice that Ranger and Galaxy made to use questionable parts from the Shenzhen electronics market don't validate MaxMod. They made a business decision, not an engineering decision. And that's what that is. It's basically we have cheap parts, and we're going to use cheap parts because we know that when we sell the radio, and with the condition that the radio is aligned to, with the specifications that device will run, and it will run at its margins, basically. There's no room for turning up the power because, yeah, the device will fail. That's a business decision. They can totally use a tip 36, and the radios won't have that component fail. So, that's really the reason. It's totally a business decision. There's no valid engineering reason for doing that. So to use that argument to say that, like, oh, MaxMod is better because they won't use the tip 36 is, wow, that's a pretty good one. So that's what my reply was. Now, then I get this answer, and I'm going to be very careful about how I word my response to, or what I got back, basically, as a response to the whole them making a business decision on not using a tip 36 in a Galaxy or a Ranger. Because this person then emails me back and says that, the tip 36s, these devices are, attributed to like all electronics failures, and that max mods never fail. Which I then said, I would like to see some actual data that supports this thing never failing and being superior in all electronic devices that use the other aforementioned device. And I didn't get a response to that. What I got was, I didn't get an answer to the question I asked. What I got is, some people say that. It's like, okay. So then, of course, when somebody says to me, well, some people say, I say, well, who is some people? Can you tell me who some people is? And of course, I didn't get an answer to that. I still, it was basically a deflection, which was, but the max mod can handle more current. So years ago, when I bought max mods, I bought 2 sets of 10. They came in tubes, and there were 10 in a tube. So we took 1 tube of them, and we tried to subject them to try to figure out if any of the parameters in the data sheet that was released for the device were correct, or if we could verify any of it, which was, and I'm going from memory here, so I may be wrong. I believe it was 40 amps constant current, constant collector current, and 60 amps peak, pulse. So we tried the pulse test on these max mods, and the end result of that is that it would blow the front of the transistor off. Center pin would come off, collector, it would go bang, and that was it. So, and I believe it was 60 amps, like 10 millisecond pulse, it would just explode. So it did not handle a pulse at the rated current that they said it would, in no way, shape, or form. And then, of course, there's like the constant collector current of like 40 amps, which we could never achieve either. The devices would fail, and they would actually fail shorted, just like most semiconductors would. They didn't like blow apart, they just failed shorted and got really hot. So that didn't wash at all. And I told them that. I said that if you can give, and I replied, and I said, if you can give me some kind of data, about your tests, I would be curious to see it. So, please forward me the data that verifies, more current, and I was actually expecting the person to maybe reply with a data sheet, but, but I didn't get that. What I got was but what about the special circuit? Which is another claim that people make about these max mods lately, is that there's a special circuit in there. I've blown these apart. There is no Darlington. There is no pre-biased transistor. There is no circuit. It's just a transistor in there. 1 die. That's it. There is no circuit. It is not a hybrid transistor. It's not a pre-biased, or so-called digital transistors. None of that stuff. It's not a Darlington. It's just a plain old transistor. Besides, you would be able to determine that from testing it externally if it had a circuit in it. There's no truth to that. So I said, okay, well, show me where there is a special circuit, what it is, how you know that, and so on and so forth. Because there's nothing even in their official, if you want to call it official literature for the sales of this thing, or the data sheet that they have released that's purportedly for it, that talks about this special circuit. And not to mention, I did not see one when I blew them apart, because I did look. So I replied with that. I was like, hey, show me where there's a special circuit. Didn't get an answer to that. What I got was, how can you explain the fact that the max mod doesn't short out like a tip 36 does when it blows up? Okay, so remember, it's supposed to never fail, but now it's failing, but when it does fail, it doesn't short, which is contrary to the tests when we were trying to do pulse tests and collector current, constant current testing to see if it could, we could stick 40 amps through it, and no, we never achieved that, and yeah, they failed shorted in certain conditions, and they blew apart in others. So that there was, and I had already addressed that. And I said, well, I've already addressed that, and I could tell you that I never encountered that in our testing, but please forward me your tests to, show that. And once again, I got a reply, which was, again, where it starts to get more ridiculous, and but you get a kickback from the company that makes the tip 36. Okay? I get a kickback from the company that makes the tip 36, which there are several companies that have made a tip 36 like device with similar specifications. So which one am I getting the kickback from? I haven't seen a check. So I replied, I said, hey, if you talk to these companies, tell them I'm waiting for my checks. I'm supposed to be getting checks from them to ask them where they are because I haven't gotten them. Because at that point, people are toying with me, so of course I'm toying back. And of course I get the ad hominem attacks after that. Well, you're this, you're that, your mother this, your mother that, ethnic slurs, semi-racist comments, and like I got like 4 or 5 emails in a row with that stuff, and I didn't reply to any of them. But that's how you got somebody, you stuck them in the corner, they can't fight anymore, and they got to resort to the ad hominems, because that is the only way that weak-minded people can argue. They can't argue the facts, they can't argue reality, they have to go immediately start talking about like your mother or your kid or your wife or your significant other or any number of things to try to put you down. And I just laugh at them, not with them. So that said, that's my Max Mod speech, and I'm going to hang it up now. So I hope that people understand it. By all means, ask away, but don't send me people sticking thermocouples in the back of transistors running at full power and then say, oh, but look, because I don't really, fall for, galactically stupid ignorance on fire testing or, bigger is better arguments. Show me the data, okay, the controlled test, and I'll take a look at it. And if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to admit that. But you got to send me the data and the conditions of the test, and it has to be a properly designed test. So, till next time, cheers.